Hello and welcome to Skill of the Week for slab pottery. Today we're going to learn how to create our slabs to create a box, and it's going to be a lidded box. And this is going to come in two parts. Today we're just going to make the slabs because they have to wait 24 hours before you can actually build the pot. So you're going to need your bag of clay. You're just going to need a cleaning tool because we're just going to use the cutting end, and you're going to need a metal ruler with no cork on the back and one that you can actually use to measure. You'll also need a bat. Okay, so let's get started. So first we're going to get our clay out. I guess I'll use this. Okay, and I like to try and get as much out as I can so I can cut as many slabs at once as possible. It's easier to do than trying to continue to make slabs over and over and over again. Okay, make sure that bag gets closed. Okay, we're going to pound this all together, kind of knead it or wedge it, as you would call in the clay world. Okay, where you are just incorporating it all together, creating a piece of clay that doesn't have any air bubbles in it. Okay, so we're getting it all put together. We're going to put it on our bat. First, I'm just going to get it pushed down so I can have a pretty solid piece that's easy to work with. Okay, and then I'm going to use the heel of my hand, just like you did in the base for the coil pot, and just tamp it down. Flip it often if you're using one of these bats that does not have any canvas on it, because it will want to stick. Now if you get to a point where it's starting to get bigger than your bat will hold, like these have holes in the sides and it's going to end up pushing through the holes, you can take it off the bat and use your table, but the table is made of a different material than the bat is, and it tends to want to stick a little bit more, so you want a little bit drier clay when you're doing that. And you don't want to pound as hard because it does, see how it sticks a little bit? So we want to be gentle. You'll want your slabs about 3/8 of an inch thick. Okay, now I'm getting an air bubble here, so I'm just going to poke that out because I don't want an air bubble in my slabs. So see, I'm just working my way across, back and forth across the slab to try to create something that's pretty even. Okay, so I'm going to measure my thickness here. Okay, that's pretty close to what I want. We want it to be pretty even, so I'm just going to even it out a little bit here. And I can feel if it's even by holding my fingers all the way around it. Okay, you can see that it's pretty even all the way across. So now I'm going to take my ruler and give myself a flat area to measure from. So I'm going to use the cutting end of my tool, go right along the edge of the ruler, and now I've got a nice flat edge. Okay, you can see it right there. And I'm just going to measure across. I want to make a pretty big box because you have to think about when you're laying your slabs on there, it's going to take up some of the space that's inside of your pot because your slabs are going to have thickness. So they're going to lay on your base slab and take up whatever space this is. So if this is 3/8 of an inch, that's going to be 3/8 of an inch off each side and this way of your pot. So you need to think about that when you think about the size. So I'm going to make it about 6.5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to measure it at the top and I'm going to measure it at the bottom. And then I'm going to line that up with my ruler and cut across. That way I have two even sides. Okay, now from here, I'm going to just line up at the very top. When it starts to curve, I'm just going to line that up with the edge of my ruler because the edge of my ruler is straight. So I should be able to get a straight line here, as long as I put that blade against the edge of my ruler. Okay, and I can just put those over there. Now I have a nice straight edge here that I can measure down this way. This is going to be the base and hopefully the top of my slab pot if I have enough space. So let's see. If I go, I have about 7 inches of space before I run out of room. So I can make a 3.5 inch size for the base here. So I'm going to make a mark at 3.5 inches and another mark at 3.5 inches and then cut that piece. That'll be my base. Carefully lift it up and put it to the side. Okay, then I'm going to make another 3.5 inch base, slab. And it just fits on there. So I've made 2 slabs, but only did the work of pounding 1 slab of clay out. So that makes efficient use of time and also your own energy. So carefully lift that up and place it to the side, top and bottom of my slabs. Okay, so obviously I'm going to need quite a bit more clay because now I'm going to make my long walls and my short walls. Okay, and I need to incorporate this clay together so that those dried pieces that we're starting to dry can get incorporated into the more moist clay that I'm going to use. Okay, so I can get this to the shape that I need. Again, I don't want to pound it down too hard there because I don't want my big fist marks making this an uneven piece of slab. So start working your way across, flip it often. That metal gets noisy. I'm going to put it down there. Okay, it might seem like I'm pounding pretty hard, but I'm actually hitting it pretty lightly, just continuing to use the heel of my hand. You can see where it's wet. That's the main portion of where I'm hitting it. Now I get a couple of air bubbles, poke those out. We don't want air bubbles in our slabs. Okay, now this should be about the same width as these slabs that we just made. Okay, we can take our ruler and double check it. I've done these for quite a long time and I can pretty much feel that it's going to be the same width. Yep, that's pretty close. Okay, so lay it down. I'm going to make a line across. Try and line that up pretty straight. Okay, so now I've got a nice straight edge right here. And I want to make my long walls first. So remember, I made those 6.5 inches long. So I'm going to make a 6.5 inch long line here. Okay, mark that line all the way across. If you don't do a line at the top and the bottom, you're going to have a crooked pot because your slab is going to be slightly skewed and you don't want that to happen. So try to make sure that you measure one side and then the other as well. Okay, so now I need to decide, I know that my length is 6.5 inches, but I need to know how tall I want my slab pot. So really, what's going to determine my height is how big I've made this slab. I really want it big enough to hold the materials that I want for it, so I don't want to have some wimpy little 2-inch box because I also have to have a lid and cut that lid in, and that's going to take up some space. So I want to make sure that it's deep enough. So let's see, I'm going to measure across here, see what kind of space I've got.
Okay, it looks like I've got about 7.5 inches before the curve, so I could make it fairly tall. I could make it 3 3/4 inches tall, and that's pretty good. So I think that's what I'll do, is 3 3/4. So I'm putting it at the 3 3/4 mark, making a line. Again, 3 3/4, and then cutting that off. Okay, and then I can lay that to the side here because I know that's going to be one of my walls. And then I'll make another 3 3/4 inch line. And another one here. And there I've got my second long wall. And again, I've only done the work once to be able to create 2 walls. So these walls are actually going to sit up on this when I'm getting ready to make my pot. Now I just need to make the short walls. Now here, with the short walls, think about it. You're going to have a slab on top here and a slab on top here. So you're going to have only this space that you're going to need to measure for. So what I need to do is measure the width of my slab. It's actually just a mark over 1/4 inch. And you want to be really careful when you're handling your slabs, because if you pull on them as you're taking them off of the table, they're going to stretch, and then they're not going to be the same size they were when you first cut them. So this is the same one. So 1/4 inch and about a mark, I'm going to say, about a 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so that means my slabs are actually going to fit right here and right here. Okay, so my measurement is only 2 3/8. 2 3/8 is the width that I'm going to need. Okay, so I'm going to grab myself some more clay. I don't need too much more because these slabs are going to be a little shorter. And I could probably do them on my bat because these are going to be a bit smaller. But I wanted to make sure I had enough room to work. Okay, a couple more air bubbles, got to get those out. And you could pretty much feel when you are pounding out your slab how much space you have. Okay, this is starting to get sticky, so I'm going to work on my bat now. I don't want it to be sticky. Couple of air bubbles. Okay, gotta get my ruler, and I gotta make my straight line. I think I want to make my straight line across this way. Okay. Now I can either make my 2 3/8 across this way, and then make my length, which I think I'm going to make my height first. So my height was 3 3/4. So 3 3/4. Make that height. 3. Make sure it's lined up there. 3 3/4. Make sure your blade is right up against the ruler. I kind of had to do a second take because I got off of where my ruler was and it cut it uneven. Okay, so now I need to make my second line, and this area seems to be kind of odd, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have a straight edge right here. Okay, and then my 2 3/8 will be right here. 2 1/2 3/8. It's going to be a small wall. 1 2 3/8. do my cut. Okay, put that right there. And then my 2 and 1, 2, 3/8 again, and 2 and 3/8. And then my cut. Okay, so I've got my 2 short walls. They should fit in there, but it looks like I cut them too short, so I must not have measured it correctly. What in the world? 2 and, oh, I know what I did wrong. It was 2.5 and then 3/8. So there, I measured wrong. Good thing I checked it before I just decided, oh yeah, it's all done, no problem. Good lesson in double checking my measurements. I wasn't looking at my numbers very well, but this won't take very long to make. And you can fast forward through this if you need to until we get to the part where you have to get it prepared for the next day. Okay, now I have slabs that fit in between my marks, and that's what I really wanted to have. I had to stretch it a little bit because it seems like it was sticking just a little. There we go. So I may have to trim this one a little bit because I had to peel on it so much, but I can do that as I put it together. So what I'm going to do, now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. That means I have my bottom, my top, or I should say my bottom and my top, my 2 long walls, my 2 short walls. I can put my clay away, pound that into the bag. Make sure we keep it nice and compact. Okay. And then I'll wrap up my slab pieces. Okay, and we want to keep those flat because we don't want to build them on the same day that we cut them, because sometimes the clay is really gushy wet and they won't hold up, it'll be skewed, it won't have a good shape to it. So we want to wrap each one individually. And I want to make sure that I keep track of my base and my top. And I know this is my base and my top, so I'm going to put those on my bat first. Okay, and I only have enough space on my bat for maybe the 2 short walls, and then I'll have to lay the long walls on something else. Make sure I have those nice and flat, and what I can do with these is wrap them in another piece, in the same piece of plastic. And then just lay it over. And then I can lay that like that. That'll still be nice and flat. Okay, they're not going to be bulging. These, if I tried to lay them on each other, they would
they would round because I've got this thick plastic here. So now I'm going to wrap my sidewalls. Again, carefully picking up your slabs. And then since I know these are pretty big, they're wider actually, just a little bit wider than my top and my bottom. So I should be able to keep track. They're still too big to go on here. See how they hang off? You don't want that to happen. So you want to make sure you find something that you can lay on it flat, like another bat or a board that you find that you can lay flat somewhere. Okay, one more. Now all our slabs are wrapped and ready to be put on the shelf to dry. And then we don't want them to dry completely. We're actually going to allow them to have 1 day of drying. So I will do another video of this tomorrow, and they will be slab pot part 1 and part 2.